Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Reclaiming My Time. Jason Pye, joined by Nathan Lamer. Nathan.
Hey man, good to see you.
It's good seeing you too. Before we get started, make sure as always that you download, like, share, subscribe, all the things, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and where else? YouTube. those are all the places we're at. So make sure you download, like, subscribe, share everything that you can to help promote Reclaiming My Time, which are dozens of listeners. If we share with another dozen listeners, we'll have even more dozens of listeners. So
this is the Amway Ponzi scheme of podcasts. And when we get to 1,000 subscribers, I will take all your money, and in exchange, I'll read all the reviews. So get them up.
It used to be 1,000 reviews. Is it now 1,000 subscribers?
No, I'll take both. Whichever one gets there first. thousand of something. And you know what? I will count comments on Facebook. I will count comments on YouTube. I'll count all the comments on Apple and Google Play and all that stuff. But guys, get us to 1,000. That's all that matters. Get us bat 1,000. That's all that matters.
Speaking of batting, you know the Braves are like 4.5, 5 games over the Phillies right now.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that.
Just making sure. I mean, we got a hell of a West Coast swing coming up. We got the Giants and Dodgers. We also played the Yankees last night. Did not. We actually lost it. We had a 9-game winning streak going into that game, and we kind of blew the lid off of it last night. So, but that's neither here nor there. Braves are better than the Phillies. I think everybody already knows that. So, are we still in Afghanistan?
So I heard. I think for like one more week, and then they're pulling the plug, like they're pulling the pin out of their grenade, and they're just kind of throwing it into Kabul and saying, "Get the hell out of here." And the U.S. is going to like get out of Kabul once and for all, with thousands, if not like tens of thousands of people clamoring to still be rescued.
I was sitting here playing video games earlier, and I get an alert because I have an Apple Watch, and I get a news alert I get like 2 back to back. I get one from The Hill and one from Politico, and both of which are about Afghanistan. The first one is that Biden says we're staying on our August 31st first trajectory to get out of Afghanistan, which, okay, despite bipartisan disagreement from Congress. And the other thing I saw was this really concerning story from Politico that says ISIS terrorist threats jeopardize Afghanistan evacuation, Pentagon assessment warrants. I was told that we got rid of ISIS, that we had decimated ISIS, but ISIS is coming back. Al-Qaeda is coming back. The Taliban's back. This seems like a shit show of epic proportions.
All we need is a tour from Nickelback, and like all of the worst enemies of the world are back. And I think I talked about this last week, but I'm really going to hit on it this week. Over the weekend, there was this image of Taliban soldiers wearing United States fatigues and U.S. weapons, putting up a Taliban flag in a complete shot imitation of our Iwo Jima flag raising, one of the most iconic scenes in American history, in which we actually defeated fascism. And now fascists are doing their own version of that. And it's a horrific photo on many different levels. But I also thought in my mind, what American PR firm is the Taliban working with to push this out? And I mean that because like these guys are getting good at PR. They are saying what they're supposed to say. Their spokesperson is basically saying, "Hey guys, we're all safe. You don't need to leave. If you leave, you just become cheap day laborers in other countries. Whereas if you come here, we will allow you to be, successful into the glory of Allah or whatever. And women, you'll be fine. Children, you'll be fine." And it's like watching Captain Hook trick the kids onto his boat. While he goes out and kills Peter Pan. It's the same thing. And
I spent my weekend, I watched a bunch of documentaries this weekend about, Afghanistan. There was Vice has been doing some pretty decent reporting on, I don't watch cable news or anything like that. I haven't been watching it during this, but like that Vice report was pretty interesting because they had a female reporter who was interviewing one of the Taliban fighters, and they said, well, what about women? Are women going to be allowed to serve public office? And the guy the Taliban fighter just started laughing. And, the other soldiers started laughing. And it's just like they're about to take they're already taking a huge step back. And I've heard from different people who who know people from either from Afghanistan or who know people in Afghanistan, and they're reporting that like there are some brutal things already happening, and it's like, and I am not a neoconservative. I'm also not like a pacifist. But we said it last week. I'll say it again. This has been handled in just the most piss poor of possibly piss poor ways you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's, and it's already starting to take this, this huge hit. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but we've seen like already two members of Congress went to Afghanistan over the weekend, one of whom was Peter Meyer, who is Congressman Amash's successor, and the other one was Seth Moulton. They
both are veterans.
Both
are veterans who have served overseas. And Peter Meyer ran a non-governmental organization, NGO, that actually did a lot of work with Afghanistan veterans and refugees. So like he has actual experience in these type of situations.
Yeah, and then the way the Washington Post story is spinning it is that it was a distraction to the people who were on the ground there because it was an quote unquote an unauthorized trip, which is frustrating. These guys have been in combat zones and war zones before.
They flew commercially to the United Arab Emirates and then somehow got on through connections to a flight that was going to Afghanistan and spent 24 hours there and got to see on the ground what was really going on. Congress actually doing oversights. While Nancy Pelosi is saying that she thinks Biden's handled this whole thing well, these two members who have, actual knowledge about how this should work or how it should look can actually tell us what's going on, how the diplomats are or are not working, what the actual conditions on the ground at the airport are, how many thousands of people are waiting to be boarded, how many thousands more will be abandoned and stranded, whether American or our Afghan Afghan allies. These guys went and they actually didn't do any press around the event. Only after the reporters started contacting their offices did they eventually confirm that they were there. It's unclear that they were in the way, hampering any of the efforts. In my mind, we need more congressional oversight. The biggest problem with Afghanistan is that military contractors, various State Department, various other agencies of the United States government were not being transparent with the American people about what our objectives were and what was actually going on the ground. And Biden has not actually had any transparency about what his plans are at all. And so we should be sending more, not fewer, members of Congress there to figure out what the heck's going on. They fly them in on the airplane, let them sit on there for a little bit while they're doing all the rescues and fly them out. But like, I'm being a little facetious, but you get my point. Like, I actually want Peter Meyer to tell the American people what happened because I think I'm going to get a better answer from him than Jen Psaki.
No, I agree with you, and it's like I'm reading the Post story now as we're talking, and it's there was one diplomat was saying it was what did they say? It was one of the most irresponsible things I've heard a lawmaker do. It absolutely deserves admonishment. And then Pelosi apparently sent a letter around to House members today. I write to reiterate that the Departments of Defense and State have requested that members not travel to Afghanistan and the region during this time of danger. I'll reiterate here that both these members are veterans. They have served in war zones. And also, I agree with you. This is the administration is giving us the version of events that they want us to hear. I mean, you heard it like last week we joked that you had the image of Baghdad Bob in the background, but listening to Jake Sullivan this weekend, Jake Sullivan.
Yes.
Yeah. So listening to Jake Sullivan this weekend.
Jake Sherman.
Jake Sherman. No, that's the Politico reporter.
Oh, Jake Sullivan. Sorry.
Jake
I get them all confused. They're all the establishment.
Yeah. The DC Beltway media and establishment. But the National Security Advisor, we'll say, who this weekend was on, he did some of the Sunday shows, and his version of events was absolutely absurd. And then last week, Biden was asked about the person who fell to his death off an American plane, and he's like, that was 4 days ago. It's like, are you listening to yourself?
So calloused, and so the opposite of empathetic. Yeah, you're totally right. And this is the American people. Here's what it comes down to. The American people may have not wanted to be in Afghanistan, but almost everyone in this country has united around the fact that this is bad. This is not how you pull out. And they do not want us to abandon those who have, bled or sweat or done anything in helping our cause, whether they were American soldiers, or our allies, interpreters, and their families. And so I think it's important for members of Congress to see what's going on. Also, by the way, like, a bunch of media have been going in and out of the country nonstop, shuttling in new reporters, pulling out others. No problems with that. Does Nancy Pelosi have an issue with that? I mean, why is it why First Amendment only apply to reporters when our legislators can't figure out what the heck's going on? They should know what's happening, and then are getting half-baked answers in these briefings. Yeah. And Congress, by the way, they're not learning anything. They're not being told the truth. They have no idea how many thousands of Americans are left. They don't know how to get some of these people cannot get in contact with the United States, can't get back to the airport. They're stranded. Then you say the word stranded, and then Jen Psaki will yell at the reporter for saying the word stranded because she says that they're not stranded. We could get them. Well, how do you get them? Well, they can come to us, but there's Taliban in the way, hitting you and assaulting you if you do. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. And the president's going to pull out in a week, and that he's going to forget about it.
Peter Meyer is on two committees here that actually really, really matter. He's on the Committee on Homeland Security and the Committee on Foreign Affairs. Those two committees, one's got an obvious, protecting the homeland. The other one is looking at our relationships overseas and also providing some oversight there. It's not the Armed Services Committee, sure. Right. But it is foreign affairs. And what we have on our hands here is a foreign policy disaster. And I say that as someone who wants out of Afghanistan. Right. I wanted us to get out of Afghanistan. And I believe, and I said this last week and I'll repeat it this week, we had a reason to go in there. The reason was clear cut. We had objectives. We had goals. We knew it was to depose the Taliban and kill Osama bin Laden. We did that in 2011. He's dead. Actually, this weekend, I mentioned before we got on that this weekend, I was rearranging my office and I found two newspapers that I bought after we killed bin Laden. My local Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I also bought the USA Today paper that had front page about Osama bin Laden's dead. And I also watched Zero Dark 30 this weekend too. But you reminded me I needed to watch that. But those objectives were completed in November, or I think November of 2001, and then May of 2011. We should have been figuring out our exit strategy, however long it took, beginning after we killed bin Laden. And also, like, by the way, we killed bin Laden in Pakistan, not in Afghanistan. So we should have figured out what this looked like then and made it as clean as we possibly could, knowing that the end result is the same end result we're seeing in terms of the Taliban taking over. But we could have had a much orderly, a much more phased withdrawal than we're having right now. One that we got all of our munitions, all of our people, all of our equipment out of Afghanistan before the country collapsed in on itself.
And also, we heard the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, the guy who was most famous for talking about white rage a few months ago. He said today, I testified before Congress that there was no intelligence evidence to suggest that there was a problem here, that this would ever happen. This was one of the contingencies that we just didn't foresee. That's insane. How does the most incredible, elaborate intelligence community ever assembled, infrastructure assembled, not know this? And apparently two guys who both come from different political points of view, and Representative Moulton and Representative Meyer from the Democrat Republican Party, both go over there. And I want to know what they saw. Did the people they talked to say, yeah, you should have foreseen this? Like, I want to know why the General Milley, this leader of our military, is saying things that, like, everyone else knew it was going to collapse. The day he said that, Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who doesn't say a lot, he doesn't speak out on political issues in a way that, a lot of members do, or the former president does. He doesn't just go off the cuff that often. Yeah. He said, no, I saw those reports and I knew this was going to collapse imminently. And the military leader said the same thing, that the general's warnings were, the other general's warnings were ignored. So we need more members of Congress to find out what's going on. You and I are both very skeptical of the NSA. We're very skeptical of surveillance policies, et cetera. But the problem with this is that we need to know what worked, what didn't work, what they did know, what they didn't know, because that can help us inform what the best policy should be, foreign or domestically, particularly as we look at, other surveillance questions. Because I could see an argument why the NSA would say, we failed in Afghanistan. You know what we need? More access to your emails. Yep. We need more access to WhatsApp. We need to break encryption, because if we had gotten rid of encryption, we would have known what's happening in Afghanistan.
No,
we need to be very aware of that, because these excuses will be used to, especially if there is Al-Qaeda coming back and the Taliban coming back and ISIS coming back, they will use every excuse to take back our liberty.
Right.
When the real question is, it was their own failure that messed this up.
You got to remember last May, 3 provisions of the Patriot Act expired, and Patriot Act and subsequently as amended by the USA Freedom Act in 2015. But was it May? No, it was March of last year. Those 3 provisions were expired, yet including the business records provision and the lone wolf provisions, Section 215. And they haven't been reauthorized. As far as we can tell, there's no push to reauthorize them. But with the situation right now where you literally have Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and potentially ISIS on the resurgence, how long is that going to last? And by the way, quick shout out to Joe Bishop Henchman, who is literally I don't really watch, like I said, I think I've said this before, I don't watch cable news. I read 3 news sources every day: Politico, The Hill, and Roll Call. Well, sorry, The Hill, Roll Call, and Reason. Politico, I still get news updates on my phone, but I don't really read it that much. But The Hill and Roll Call and Reason provide me the news I need. But whenever I get on Facebook, Joe is always posting stuff that keeps me in the loop.
Joe Henchman is our generation's Walter Cronkite. And some people might think I'm lying or exaggerating. I'm not. This guy gets to the fact, every news story, whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's updates during the Black Lives Matter protest last year, the George Floyd protest, he is tracking everything, posting on his Facebook. And also he's giving us inside details with the Libertarian Party and their problems. But he's been posting recently a lot on the poll numbers, which we were going to talk about here, is that the polling data shows the United States perspective on Joe Biden and his leadership have just cratered overnight.
Before we get to that, one of the things Joe posted today is a Politico story that the title really says it all. The title says, quote, the definition of gaslighting: as chaos unfolds at Kabul airport, Biden team projects calm. And that's a good segue into what we're seeing in the polling data. So obviously there was a poll that came out today from USA Today in Suffolk that has Biden at 41% approval and 55% disapproval. He's underwater by 14 points. Now, I tend to think that's an outlier, but whether or not it's an outlier, we are seeing in the polling data that Biden is his approval rating is beginning to fall pretty steadily. And you can look at this and there's one particular poll that has been updated pretty steadily. It's Reuters and Ipsos. So let's see here. Reuters Ipsos will go August 4th. Biden was at 50% approval, 43% disapproval. He was +7. A week later, August 11th, August 12th, when the poll was conducted, 51% approve, 43% disapprove. The poll that Reuters Ipsos just put out was conducted on August 18th, August 19th. So this would have been last week. He is at 46 approve, 49 disapprove. So he has had that much of a swing in just a week, where he was over 50% just last week, and he is now, or a week before last, he is now underwater, and he's seen a 5-point drop in his approval rating. That's significant. And regardless of whether the USA Today Suffolk poll is accurate or not, whether it's an outlier or not, it's kind of irrelevant. It is showing the downward swing.
CBS and NBC and a number of other polling entities and media outlets were publishing polls. This one's very fascinating to me. Do you think Joe Biden has a clear path for evacuating American civilians from Afghanistan or not? And this is from YouGov. 67% said no plan. that you can't get 67% of Americans to agree on anything. In that same Ipsos poll, that again, Joe Henchman, this should be Joe Henchman News Network. I'm all in on it. He posted a screen grab from them, and it was how do Americans feel about here we go. I just scrolled on his Facebook. I'm literally scrolling through his Facebook to find it. About feelings about transporting, Afghan refugees to the United States, and it was like 80% approval. 80%. Like, first off, to the populist national conservatives who are still pushing the line that we shouldn't be bringing them over here, you're insane. You are the definition of non-populist, because the populist is actually in support of bringing over refugees. Secondly, shout out to our pastor Chris Six here in Alexandria. He is a pastor of a church called One Voice Fellowship, and we've been in contact with him about efforts to they're calling it Adopt a Family. Sort of works like dozens, if not hundreds, of Afghan refugees are partnering with our church and some other local churches to like help get them food, help get them shopping, help them get acclimated to the United States, help them kind of figure out where things are. And Chris Six says like everyone in the church is asking to help, how they can help. I mean, again, that's just my church. It's just one community, but like there are people all across the country, across different political views, religious views, who are trying to say, hey, we want to help. Even though Joe Biden wants to leave tens of thousands of them still in Afghanistan to face the wrath of the Taliban. A lot of people, and as Joe Henchman has posted, want to bring them all here.
One thing I will note real fast is while this poll is pretty bad for Biden, this USA Today Suffolk poll, I will note some quick points about the poll. This is from the story highlights that they did on the poll. Of those surveyed, 62% put the responsibility for the Afghanistan war on George W. Bush. Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan was approved by most Americans, but only 26% approved of Biden's handling of the withdrawal. So there is that most Americans are on board with getting out of Afghanistan, but they just don't like how it was handled. When you have a 26%, a quarter of Americans essentially saying that this was badly handled, that's a condemnation. But at the same time, a lot of people do kind of reflect that opinion that we needed to get out. And, but I think a lot of us, the one thing that I've heard from a lot of my conservative friends over the course of the past week has been that Biden's withdrawal is evidence that he is not going to run again. So that's something to also think about, that he's biting the bullet. He's taking the bullet on this, going ahead and pulling us out. Seeing his approval ratings crater. He doesn't really seem to care too much.
Yeah. And
maybe that's because he's not going to run again.
Well, so this also, that's a fair point. The other side too that I would say is I'm going to connect with Joe Biden, his team's response to that of Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom here. Look, there is a callousness among the three of them with the way they responded to COVID. Yeah. There is a callousness that, like, if you're unvaccinated, or if you're a Republican, or if you live in the rural areas, it's your problem. It's your fault. Andrew Cuomo's just draconian efforts that led to the death of many more older folks than should have because of his nursing home policies. Gavin Newsom literally on shutting down the economy, trying to turn California into Australia, and all the while he's enjoying the French laundry. Joe Biden's just obsession with a particular brand of science to perpetuate authoritarian ends that kind of make this pandemic seem like it's going to last longer. Those become issues when you look at other things that are happening. Gavin Newsom, it's the homeless crisis in the economy. People started looking at Andrew Cuomo's inappropriate behavior and the Me Too movement, and what happened there, and the horrible nature of it. But then also Joe Biden, you're starting to see, and the polling shows this, people are really concerned about his handling of COVID. That's drawing down. The inflation, this administration seems completely to not pay attention to the fact that we are on the up and how much things are costing, and the economy is screwed up and stuck. And are standing in foreign perspectives, and everything else is just stuck. And there's a callousness and a lack of empathy with what's happening, and also blaming the wrong people. Blaming certain people for the woes of everyone else when, there's a lot more at stake. Every time I hear him go after Ron DeSantis or a Republican governor, I think, it wasn't Ron DeSantis who said the J&J should stop, who halted the J&J. It's not Ron DeSantis that kept the FDA from approving this months later when they should have given a full approval much earlier. They should have streamlined that process. It's not Ron DeSantis who invited TikTok stars to try to convince NASCAR viewers to get the vaccine. I mean, come on. Like, this is just what world do you live in? No. These guys live in a different reality, and I think the public is starting to pick up on that.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. And speaking of it's shifting gears a little bit. Speaking of the pandemic, so last week I had saw something going on through Facebook. It was one of those stupid circle ribbon things that you put on Facebook, and the one I saw, that I think it was a friend of mine, Patricia Rausch. I want to say that's who I saw post it, and her and her husband Scott are friends of mine. But the little thing, I don't know what they're called, the ribbons, whatever the hell it is. It says, "I have a healthy distrust of authority, and I'm vaccinated." And I posted it because there's a number of people I either know or friends of mine have family members or friends who refuse to get vaccinated, and they're going and spending. I mean, they're getting sick. They're getting the Delta variant, which is apparently, it's very worse than the regular old strain of COVID-19. But
we talk about it as if it's like a new pack of cigarettes, like a new type of cigarettes that came in. Like, did you get that vape? Like, did you get that flavor?
Dude, did you hear the new COVID album? It's sick, man. It's sick.
It's taking over the South, man.
Taking over the South, man. It's a regional thing. It's a regional thing. But no, I mean, so I got tired, and I guess I'm getting tired of all the conspiracy theories and skepticism related to the vaccine and COVID, and just so the YouTube and Facebook algorithms, who maybe, I don't know, reading the transcript of this or whatever, I don't know how they do it, but we're both vaccinated, and we encourage you to get vaccinated. But I also understand there are people who have certain health issues that can't get vaccinated, and I understand that. I don't know if you saw the story about the drummer from The Offspring who has I forgot what disease he has, but he literally can't get vaccinated, so he quit the band because so many venues are requiring proof of vaccination or a negative test 72 hours in advance. So all that said, I want to influence whoever I can in my personal network. So I decided to post this. I probably won't keep it up much longer, but I decided to put this thing on my Facebook profile because I just got sick of seeing so much skepticism out there. And so it was a bit of a frustration for me because I either know people. There's one person in particular who actually last summer when I was posting, like, please wear a mask, he actually defriended and blocked me on Facebook because I heard a couple of weeks ago that he was in the ICU. He was on a ventilator, and he was struggling. I don't know. Because he blocked me, I can't see whether he made it. I heard about it from someone else. But there are people who went to, this became such a political issue so fast that people went to these extremes and these conspiracy theories and these all this bullshit about COVID. And I'm still frustrated by it, that people just, we inoculate our kids against, I mean, I don't have kids, but I know my nieces and nephews are all vaccinated against measles, mumps, and rubella. You get these vaccinations to prevent yourself from getting sick or catching these things that we've largely eradicated. And here we are, we have a chance to not necessarily eradicate COVID, but to guard ourselves against it to the extent that we can, and provide ourselves with at least some protection. So if we do get it, it won't be as bad, because that's what we're seeing is that 95+% of people who are in the hospital are unvaccinated.
Yeah. I mean, as I saw on Joe Henchman, I'm serious. We're going to turn into the Joe Henchman. He's got to come on the pod. I think we need to get him on the pod. But as I saw on Joe Bishop Henchman's Facebook, he actually had a great meme. I'm serious. He is my source of news. He had a meme that said, out of the cases down south, it was, by the way, he posts too much, so it's hard to keep track, but he had this really interesting, here it is. He said, I have 274 hospitalizations in Sarasota Memorial Hospital. 246 are unvaccinated, 28 are fully vaccinated. And then it goes into 48 patients in the ICU. One is fully vaccinated, 47 are unvaccinated. And then 36 are on ventilators altogether. This is out of the Winter Hospital. One fully vaccinated person is on a ventilator. 35 unvaccinated people are on ventilators. So again, I think about it this way: if you take away all those unvaccinated people, you just have a very, very small amount of people who are still getting it among adults, and that is pretty telling and scary, but also fixable. Like, yeah, those are, you still don't get it, but it's fixable, because if you had the vaccine, it'd be fixed. Now, I saw your little icon, and I had two quibbles. First, I have an unhealthy like perspective of distrust of authority. I have, like, it's unhealthy how distrustful I am of authority. I don't think there's anyone I know who would say, oh yeah, Nathan has a healthy distrust of authority. No, Nathan is like vehemently distrustful, like to an unhealthy degree. But I decided to get a vaccine because I read things, I looked at the data, and I looked at logic.
Yeah.
And that's why I got vaccinated. Not because of authority, but because it was the thing to do. It made sense to me. So I just want to point that out. That's a little different.
Well, one of my friends, hold that thought, because one of my friends replied back on my Facebook post, and he says, I don't think healthy is a strong enough adjective for your distrust of authority. And
yeah, I was going to say,
I said, unfortunately, no one made one that reads, I have utter contempt for authority and I'm vaccinated.
But what's funny is, if you go on the likes, you have 205 likes. Yeah. That's probably more than ever heard this podcast. If you go through them, you will see that a lot of them actually have this new profile. You are a trendsetter. But the thing is, I did some digging as I was going through the Facebook algorithm. This is what freaked me out. You weren't the first person to post this. Is it Patricia? Another great person. She should come on the pod too. It'd be great to have her as a subscriber and write a review, and then I'll read it on the air, and it'd be great to have her support. But there were other people who liked it and developed before you, and they were all like kind of my like libertarian frenemies and friends within the DC movement. And I thought to myself, did like Charles Koch send like a bat signal and all of y'all like responded? Like, this is, I couldn't figure it out. It was like all my friends from Americans for Prosperity, everyone from Freedom Works, everyone from like Charles Koch Institute, Stand Together, and Mercatus Center, and George Mason. And I'm like, wait a second. Was this an MBM like course that I just totally missed? Like, what market-based management like a professional development course did I miss? Because I just saw it everywhere, and I'm like, I am so distrustful of authority. I am not going to make this my profile pic.
No, I mean that's entirely. So I'm looking at the people who liked it. So I think Patricia was the one who I saw get it, and then Shoshana got it, and who we've had on the podcast before. And then she got it, I think, before I did, but I think I saw her later. And then like a bunch of other people. I mean, I'm not really friends with that many Coke people on Facebook, like a few, but not many. Like Ted Ellis, but Ted Ellis doesn't have it. He's a Coke guy. He's an AFP guy. But like, I'm looking at the people who liked it here, and I don't see that many, but yeah, I'm looking for the Coke folks, and I just don't see them. There's a couple ex-Cato ex-Cato people who have it.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of people who may have went to a Grover Norquist meeting once. Like that's kind of what I was getting. It's a movement thing. I'm just so, I just couldn't do it. I love you too much. In my spirit, I had a profile pic, but it would say unhealthy distrust of authority. Yeah, that's my only quibble. But I like it. I like the fact that like it got engagement. I would also say it's a good message. Like, it's a good message that even if you're distrustful of authority, even if you are concerned by our leaders and elected officials, like, you should still do this.
No, I mean,
I think it's a very fair point.
I think it's just something we all have to kind of realize. Excuse me. That I don't know, like the the train of thought that goes through somebody's head who says, 600,000 people have died. Most of the people, the vast majority of the people who are in the hospital with COVID are unvaccinated. I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to do it just to show them because of the evil pharmaceutical companies, or Joe Biden's telling me I should get vaccinated, or what. I mean, Trump also told you to get vaccinated. Trump got vaccinated. Like, he's your God. So why don't you do what he does? I mean, the thing is, like, the thing that people don't seem to understand, particularly conservatives, is just like, we know politicians will use emergencies the to take advantage of us, to take power that in extraordinary circumstances, and they don't ever really want to let it go, and it's very difficult to wrestle that power away. The Kentucky state legislature actually passed some legislation this year to wrestle some of that power away, and it with the governor Bashir, he sued and he lost, thank God. And so the legislature has restored some of their power and taken some of his away. But in other states, we're finding it very difficult for politicians to let go of this power, for governors to let go of this power. But the people who are refusing to get vaccinated, you're giving them an excuse to continue doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not saying I don't like authority. I don't trust government. And I have a long-winded personal story that I'm happy to tell people one day. But you're basically giving them an excuse. And not only that, you're contributing to people dying because of your skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I mean, I'll say it here: the people who are skeptics, who are promoting these conspiracy theories, who are refusing to get vaccinated, and spreading their this cancer to other people, they have blood on their hands. Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's the tweet.
So all of this is true about the need for vaccinations, but where I have 3 kids, as you know, and as our dozens of followers know, and it's back to school time, and I'm seeing a lot of conversations about. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, but before you go into that, but let me one thing I wanted to note here real fast, because yes, I pulled up the Georgia report about breakthrough cases, and I wanted to provide that data. So
yeah, go ahead.
This is there are 4.3 million fully vaccinated Georgians, which is roughly less than half the state. Of fully vaccinated people, 18,697 have tested positive. That is 0.004%. Mm-hmm. 0.004. 824 hospitalized for any reason, which may not include COVID. Mm-hmm. 0.0002%. 134 have died due to COVID. 0.00003%.
That means it takes it from a pandemic to an issue people to be concerned about, like they would be with the flu or a bad cold or allergic reaction to peanut butter or something.
Just get fucking vaccinated.
Exactly. And I think, and I was gonna say that there's a lot of mixed messaging as you see it around DC, where it's like people are, you saw the governor of Oregon say that you got to wear masking outside even if you're vaccinated. I'm seeing, my church, same church that I'm happy with their refugee efforts. They're saying if you come to church, even if you're vaccinated, you have to wear a mask, even though it's not effective at all. And again, we talked about this with the Provincetown study. Like, that study did not say what the CDC said it should say. And they came to conclusions that could be explained in many different ways. And as kids are going back to school, and I'm facing this here, there's been a lot of talk about concern about kids and, debates about whether schools should require masking or not. My wife and I chose to send our kids to a private Christian school this year, not homeschooling this year, but a private Christian school that actually sent an email last week saying that we do not see any compelling reason that we should do this. There's no science behind it. If you feel like you want to do it because it makes you feel better, good for you, but we're not requiring it in our school. And also, we don't think that the state of Virginia has jurisdiction over our school because we're a private school. So we're going to do what we want. And if you sign this waiver and say you're cool with that, you don't have to send your kid in a mask. And today I met with our kindergarten teacher. Orientation is for parents was today. And I met with Mrs. Law. She's a lovely teacher. And we talked about our son, Ephraim, who has a little speech therapy. He's been working through speech issues, and he's growing. He's developing so well, and he's just awesome to watch him grow. And she asked me, like, are you going to send him with a mask or not? I said no. And she says, good, because that will help me be able to connect with him better. That will help me help him speak better. And I thought to myself, there are so many kids with speech therapy issues, so many kids with other behavioral and developmental issues, that like masking is one way that you can limit their ability to communicate with other people, can limit their development. And I especially young kids, and it goes back to this, national New York Magazine article that came out early this weekend. By the way, the same team at the New York Magazine that shed light on the lab leak theory and how like our prevailing narrative on that was flawed, wrote this article about a CDC study that came out this summer that had important findings in the study that were not discussed and not discussed widely in the press reporting. These findings cast doubt on the impact of many of the most common mitigation measures in American schools: distancing, hybrid models, classroom barriers, HEPA filters, and most notably, requiring students masking, were each found to not have a statistically significant benefit. In other words, these measures could not be said to be effective. And it goes through and actually looks at a study in Georgia and says that the clusters were not, masking versus unmasking didn't really affect the numbers at all. Looking at European countries that have had no issues with this at all, even like Israel and other European countries who have done a lot of studies on this. And the fact is that like we're claiming this masking narrative, ostensibly to keep unvaccinated teachers or unvaccinated adult workers safe, when it's unclear that kids, I heard a line today that I thought was great. It was kids are less likely to get COVID than you are as a vaccinated adult. That's just the data. That's what we know. And this was attacked by the same people who are public health experts who have been quoting things on Twitter. This is a right-wing study in the New York Magazine. This is, propaganda. These guys should have blood in their hands, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is not what they're saying. They're basically regurgitating what the CDC said and what the American, physicians associations have said in the past, and what's out there, what we know. And they're saying this narrative over the masking, I think, is really just a political football of whether you should like Ron DeSantis or not, because of what's happening there in Texas and Governor Abbott. I don't care. Look, the federalism argument on that's not for me to fight. My point is we should be looking at the studies, and parents should know what's going on, the risk or the lack thereof.
Well, I mean, if you live in a home with vulnerable people who aren't vaccinated, I mean, maybe even some who are vaccinated, maybe you want to have your kid wear a mask when they're in school. But otherwise, like, I haven't seen this study basically backs up everything I've been hearing for the past year and a half.
Right. It was a silver lining of COVID. I don't know why we all of a sudden switched the narrative as basically we're using kids as a pawn in a bigger political fight. And you're going to go after states for civil rights violations over the masking requirements, all this stuff. Like, this is just ridiculous. And it's also, again, it goes back to the fact that like I saw pictures of our local elementary school that my kids used to go to, and they showed all the COVID protocols that they've set up in rooms. Dude, these classrooms do not look like American classrooms. You know what they look like, Jason?
What do they look like?
They look like visitation rooms at jails, like family visitation rooms. You have plexiglass everywhere. You have people separated. No touching.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this isn't school. This isn't education. This isn't kindergarten. This isn't third grade. This is insane what we're putting people through. And guess what? My kids are learning about the evils of Stalinism and learning Latin, and also not having to wear a mask. So like, shout out to school choice. I win, they lose.
Yay, Christian Reconstructionism.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
That reminds me of the Christian school I went to until 9th grade.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna sing hymns to Rush Dooney,
or I should say through 9th grade. Yeah, it was like basically Christian Reconstructionism. It was and like, look, I agree. Yes, communism is awful. Communism is awful, but yeah, it was a little much.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for my kids to learn a little Latin. Very excited. And also, again, I'm happy that my kid will be able to see their teacher's face, because guess what? The teachers are all vaccinated.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
And then what else we got on the oh god.
Can I ask you about this? So there's been a lot of reports about Herschel Walker, who one time Philadelphia Eagle and the Georgia Bulldog great. He is potentially running for Senate in Georgia. And I keep on seeing friends of ours, Eric Erickson, political pundits, say he can easily win the primary, but he'll lose the general election. I'm seeing stories about like assaulting his ex-wife. I'm seeing like death threats, multiple personality disorder, which means he'll fit in Washington, D.C. So I don't see anything wrong with that. But like, what is it? What's going on there? Who are the other candidates? Why should I pay attention to this? You know, is Herschel the best guy? Is he the worst guy? What's your take?
So there's actually a number of different candidates who are running for this. You have the current agriculture commissioner, Gary Black, who's running. You have a businessman by the name of Kelvin King, who's also a black guy, who's running. You have a mid-level to junior level staffer from the White House named Latham Sadler, who actually had a pretty
Evan McMullen.
No, Latham Sadler. He worked for the Trump White House. He actually raised $1.4 million in the second quarter, which is pretty impressive. He outraised all the other candidates, which is a pretty big deal. And then you have a congressman from down on the coast, Buddy Carter, who's been talking about running. But Carter's unlikely to. He always said like he wasn't going to run if Herschel Walker ran. And look, anybody who watches the podcast who knows me knows I am a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan. I've been to games and I grew up on Herschel Walker lore. He's a legend in Georgia football and not just Georgia football, but the state of Georgia. He set many high school records when he was playing here. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. He was part of that 1980 Georgia Bulldogs national championship team. He should not run for Senate. He has filed paperwork with the FEC to run. He has not officially announced his campaign, but the filing of the paperwork is telling in and of itself. He just registered to vote in Georgia literally yesterday. He's for the last several decades, at least last few decades, has been a resident of the state of Texas. Although his wife allegedly illegally voted in Georgia, despite being registered to vote in Texas, she apparently registered and voted in Georgia because they own a home. And when she was asked about it, she said, basically insinuated that she could vote in any state where she owned property. Which is a pretty interesting take. And the Secretary of State's Brad Raffensperger threatened to prosecute anybody who did something like that. So I'm waiting on that prosecution. That said, or at least the investigation and then subsequent prosecution if they decide the charges are warranted. But Herschel Walker has name ID in the state. There is no getting around that. He has there was a recent poll that came out that compared him against Warnock, the senator from Georgia, Raphael Warnock, Democrat, who Warnock Walker's numbers were, he was like plus 15%, something like that in terms of his favorability. But he was trailing Warnock by 2 inside the margin of error. The things that you mentioned up at the top, that he once allegedly threatened his wife, I think with a firearm. I don't remember off the top of my head. Maybe not. And then he also has dissociative identity disorder, which he's been open about. And he does things to raise awareness to the issue. But a lot of these things is particularly the stuff related to either his, I think it was his ex-wife, maybe not his current wife.
Yeah, it was his ex-wife. It stemmed from incidents in 2001, which is when she divorced him. He was diagnosed with this multiple personality disorder after that fact, and has actually apparently done things to try to get his life back on track and get his mental state in a better place. But yeah, I mean, I just knew him as the football player. I didn't really know anything else about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's the thing with, yeah, he apparently did. I think he did. No, I can't. I'm trying to find that thing about the interaction with his wife. But it's really tough because he is so well regarded in Georgia as being this college football star, and his USFL career actually started out really well, which he played for Donald Trump's team and obviously was on Celebrity Apprentice, and Trump has endorsed him and encouraged him to run. those are all things that, I think those are all things that like are gonna those things are gonna aid him as he approaches this campaign. But let's be honest here, anywhere from a third to a 40% of Georgians or Georgia Republicans are going to vote for him simply because Trump has endorsed him.
Right.
He is the favorite to win. But I do agree with people like Eric Erickson and others who are saying that he will probably cost, more likely than not, cost Georgia Republicans a shot at the Senate seat, which they desperately need to take control of the Senate in next year's midterm elections. So Walker, his campaign will most likely be surrounded by grifters who are in it to make a quick buck. They'll get their 18% ad buys and laugh all the way to the bank, but Republicans won't have a Senate seat. And I think that's probably the most likely scenario here. And Walker is, I just don't see this being sustainable. I don't.
Well, one of my favorite members of Congress was John Runyon, not because of any of his votes, but just because he was a cool dude and he played for the Eagles. I was excited to see a potential running back, make it to the league, make it to the Senate. But, if you're telling me maybe not, I get it. Although maybe we do need more carpetbaggers running for offices. I mean, have you thought about that? Do we need more people moving in?
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Georgia's a weird state in the sense because everything has changed so much down here. You have, I mean, look, I mean, I went through. We're the Hollywood of the South. We've attracted a lot of the movie industry here. I mean, some of the Marvel films or Marvel movies and TV shows have been filmed in Metro Atlanta, Fayette County, which is about 30 miles from me on the other side of Metro Atlanta. That's where one of the big studios is. There's one Tyler Perry owns one in which used to be a fort. It was closed during BRAC. Is Fort McPherson. He built the studio there. So there's a lot of industry people moving into the state, and also, but the demographics of the state have shifted so much. Kelvin King or Herschel Walker may surprise us in the sense, and this is like the one thing. That's why I'm like kind of hedging. I'm saying like probably or very likely because I want to leave a little bit of room because like both Kelvin King and Herschel Walker are Black, and for the first time in Georgia history, Metro Atlanta is majority minority. Right. And we just found that out because the census data and the state is now 50.1% white. So Georgia's shifting, Georgia's changing, and this, but regardless of how this race shakes out, this is going to be the last time Republicans probably are really competitive in a Senate race in Georgia, because just the way the demographics are shifting, and it's how radically they shifted. Nathan Deal was reelected for governor just 7 years ago by a pretty healthy margin. Donald Trump won Georgia in 2016, but just barely. Mm-hmm. And then Brian Kemp just barely won the race for governor. And I think anybody who watches this podcast, who's an observer of Georgia politics or knows a little bit about Georgia politics, I've been saying it for years that Georgia was eventually going to turn purple, and because of the demographic shifts. I always expected it to happen in 2022 or 2024. That's when I thought we would really start to see it. It's happened a lot. Right. It's happened a couple of years sooner than I think a lot of us anticipated, but it's happened. It's happening. And Republicans may hold on to the legislature for the next few cycles, but that's probably going to be it. And the statewide races, one by one, will start going Democratic. So, and look, whether Stacey Abrams runs for governor, because there's a lot of whispers in the state that she might not run for governor, you still got Warnock at the top of the ticket. And black voters here will turn out for him. So we'll see how it plays out, particularly if Republicans have another old white man running, like Gary Black, or, and Lathan Sadler is in his 30s, and, he's energetic, he's young, he's a veteran, but he's still a white dude, and it doesn't reflect the makeup of the state anymore, particularly Metro Atlanta. And rural areas like Brian Kemp, when the governor of state, he barely came into Metro Atlanta. He focused entirely on rural areas, and he managed to win by 50-something thousand votes. That's not going to work this time. I
know one person in Georgia can't win.
Me.
Matt Ryan. Can't finish it. Just can't finish it.
Oh my God.
Well, I appreciate the deep dive into Georgia politics. Something we'll be clearly paying attention to. I mean, that race and the Arizona race could really dictate, whether we stay 50-50 or 49-51, 48-52. It's going to be a pretty big 2022.
But it looks like the House is going to flip. I mean, early bets are on Republicans to win, especially after Afghanistan and the way that whole thing's been handled.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's looking that way right now. But anything can happen. Things can change.
Yeah,
socialism could be popular, someday.
Don't ever count Pelosi out. That's what I
wouldn't.
That's what I always say. But look what she did today. She managed to get a budget through the most ridiculous of ways possible.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So the process on that was horrible. But that's a topic for another podcast. So I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I think the people have reclaimed their time, and I'm excited to have a good weekend, and it's good to reconnect.
Yeah, it's good to reconnect. We'll be back. I'll be back next week. I don't know about you. I'll be
there. I'll be here.
You'll be here? Excellent. So we'll be back. We'll be back next week with another Reclaim It My Time. Make sure, again, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Facebook, YouTube. I think that's it. And then you can follow us on Twitter as well. We hope you have a great weekend, great rest of your week. We'll see you next Tuesday night on Reclaim It My Time. Peace out.
See you later. Bye, guys.